Open the sunroof. Now, because I can only hope somebody signs the contract.
We have invocation by Pastor Scott Moore.
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we thank you for a beautiful day in the beautiful city of Broken Arrow. And we thank you for all that you do for this community. We thank you for the leaders that you have assembled for this time and for this place. Father, we come asking for your guidance and your wisdom as we work through these agenda items that we're going to be considering. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion. Help us to make good decisions, not just decisions that help us for right now, but decisions that will continue to lead us into the future with a great quality of life. We ask that you would guard our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness and right thought and speech. And we ask again for your supreme wisdom upon all of our activities and our efforts this evening, that great things would continue to happen in this great city. We ask this in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Roll call.
Ford.
Here.
Moody.
Here.
Parks.
Here.
Gillespie.
Here.
Wimpy.
Here. Please stand and join Councilor Udi for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have to pull item AD off the consent agenda for a discussion. Are there any other items?
Move to approve the consent agenda absent item AD.
Second? We have a motion and a second. Roll call. Okay. All right. Item AD, approval of color scheme selection to be used for decorative pavers and colored concrete included in the New Orleans Square Street and Elm Place intersection and Streetscapes improvement project. Mr. Schwab.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Kenny Schwab, Assistant City Manager over Operations. So the item before you is the color scheme for the New Orleans Square project, the intersection at Elm. We bid two different color schemes, a warm tone and a cool tone. Warm tone, I believe, if you can call it up, I don't know that we had that one in there. So the warm tone is really the beige and more of an earth tone type. The cool tone is more of a charcoal and a gray. Both of those are very similar in cost and pretty well match the overall scheme of the plan set. And we have bids on those. Through some more discussions, there has been a discussion about can we bring in more of a blue tint, if you will, to try to tie it into the overall New Orleans and Elm theme, the New Orleans Square theme, which is you can do. As I told Norm earlier today, I'm going to talk about this real briefly in terms I understand. So mix it in concrete, it's kind of like making a cake. When you're baking a cake and you're mixing it, you're trying to get that batter consistent. And now you want a color in it and you add the color into the mix of it. Well, that's one thing if you're making one of them. But when you're making cake after cake after cake and you're trying to get it consistent, it becomes a little bit of a problem. So think about the concrete. We're going to be mixing this at a plant, putting it in a truck of 6 cubic yards, bringing it out to the site. It's one thing to do it in July and August. It's another thing to do it in September and October. It's another thing to do it in November and December because temperature affects it. Traffic the longer it takes for them to get there. Concrete begins to harden immediately, unlike your cake, but it begins to harden immediately, so they've got to add water, which breaks down some of the consistency. So typically you see the 4 colors that we basically talked about, the earth tones and the cool, because those are easier to control. But yes, you can do blues. You can do it with an aggregate. And what you see up here is our consultant ran this layout scheme today. We don't have all the numbers yet, but we do have a plan in place, and I'll recommend that to you here in a minute. But you could, up in the upper right, the blow up detail, you can pre-manufacture or manufacture the aggregate and make it more of a bluish. That's kind of almost a bluish purple tint, but you can control it that way. If you do it in the concrete mix itself, it goes back to what I talked about, the consistency of making it. But you can get some blue in there. Talking to the manufacturers, because of the control issue, it's not really the material. It may take 6-7 times more material to put in there to control it, but it's a difficulty of controlling it. So where we stand right now is we would recommend taking a look at this with maybe a variation of 2, mainly the emblem in the center. Can we get blue in that? Whether it's in the mix, whether it's in the aggregate, or possibly the trim, but we would recommend the emblem itself, mix or aggregate. And on June the 20th, I would come back with not only a recommendation, I'd come back in hand of doing it either way. So I'd know I have tied down the cost with the contractor. I've tied down any time thing, any time constraint with the contractor. And then bring that back in front of you. So you would still have the option that we bid, which is the just a little bit, there's a cool tone, one of those 2, or a variation of what we're presenting tonight. I don't, cost-wise, after going through a lot of it, the emblem itself, it's probably, we're guessing the emblem is about $30,000 in cost. It would probably take it closer to 80 or 90,000. If you went with a solid blue, that's probably the higher end. If you did the aggregate, it's probably somewhere in between. So it's not a huge cost. It's just, are the materials readily available and can they make that happen?
Well, believe it or not, I actually poured concrete when I was many years ago. I know technology's changed, but my biggest concern was being able to make a level of consistency, because that was always a challenge, is mixing it, especially when you're doing multiple batches.
Yes.
Mixing it coming in, even with what's proposed here, I worried about the ability to maintain consistency, and was going to ask about that, if they're confident they can, so that it looks uniform. Because if you walk down the sidewalk, there's difference in consistency depending on whether it was poured in December or poured in April.
Exactly.
And so that was my concern. And when are they planning to pour this?
So tying right into that, the emblem itself is about 120 cubic yards of concrete. So that's going to be 20 truckloads.
Right.
So you break that into 4, you basically got, I'm going to say 5 to 6 truckloads for each quadrant, 45 days apart. So we will maybe place the first one in the next 45 days, middle of late July to August. Then 45 days later, you'll probably place the southwest corner. And then 45 days later, you'll place the southeast corner. Could be up to 60, but 45 to 60 days. So back to what Councilor Udi's talking about, the temperature, and then the time getting it out based on traffic and how quick do they get here, depends on how much, that's the water that they're having to add to it to control
I
it.
was going to say, you have to add chemicals and things to it to get, which can affect the color and the consistency of what's being
It
poured.
can, yes, sir.
Which is going to be the case no matter what.
I know.
Right. color you
Yes.
do.
That is true.
But that's why that's why I was, when they said the warm tones, generally I figured the cool tone. I read and I understood about generally the cool tones be able to maintain more consistency, I would think, then, because the more color you have, the more chance you have of it being inconsistent in the pour.
In practice, that has, yes, it's just a control issue. So the recommendation tonight would be either table what's in front of you and direct us to come back in 2 weeks with change orders, so you know the exact time that it would add and the exact cost that it would add, or approve what's in front. So we're open to
But
either
And
way.
that's what I want to do, is to table
table
it
it
now
with the
and come
director?
back in 2 weeks, and I can talk about why, if anybody cares.
Or could we not, I mean, I would want to hear that, but can we not, as an alternative, can we not approve it, subject to the change order that you talked about bringing on the 20th so that we could get the ball rolling? Is that what I understood you were saying?
The only reason why I wouldn't recommend that is because I do not know the cost. I just don't know the cost right
I'd
now.
like to come back in 2 weeks.
I'm fine with that. you'd mentioned approving something tonight and doing a change order, and if I understood correctly, so I was trying to.
Will that hold anything up? I know it's closed off or slowed down because my wife's already warned me.
No, there's plenty of work for them to be doing. I just can't get into they have to order the concrete, the decorative concrete, and it is a critical path item, so we need to get it ordered pretty quick so that we can get into the line of when they do that. So my thought would be it would push our closing date maybe a couple of weeks, but as I've talked about, it's more important that we get it right in the beginning. We can take a couple of weeks. I'd rather get it right in the beginning because going back is going to be difficult. So I'd rather
I
do
want
that.
expensive.
Well, and the reason that I ask it to be pulled, and it's obviously I'm very emotionally attached to New Orleans Square, but I feel like we spent, as a council, we spent a lot of time on branding and the logo and everything about this, New Orleans Square. And part of that branding was the color scheme, and the warm concept just doesn't go with that branding at all. I'm really surprised that the consultant didn't just give us something that went along with our branding, because to me, that's very, very important. We spent a lot of money. And then when we look, like I went back and looked at the Catalyst report, and their conceptual design for the intersection was, I mean, obviously you can only do so much with an intersection when you're not doing a roundabout. But anyway, I'm still bitter. But some of the things that they had, I liked just because it was a little brighter and it did show more contrast. But then it made me think about that. And so that's when I started like, okay, and I was trying to be happy with your recommendation, but I just couldn't make it happen because it just doesn't go along with our branding. And isn't that what we spend a lot of time on and money?
So let's come back to you in council in 2 weeks with the recommendation. I think all the points are well worth us giving it a look, and then the council make a determination on the 20th.
Okay. All right, I'll make that motion to table AD until 2 weeks from tonight. With a motion, is there a second?
A second.
Sorry, I'm trying to get back to. Do you have to do a voice? Or are we good?
We're good.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call. Thank you, Kenny,
All right. Thank you very much.
and everyone else. Okay. Table the item. All right, item 7A, public hearings, appeals, presentations. Conduct a public hearing for the proposal 2022-2023 fiscal year budget.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and those in attendance this evening and those watching. As a part of the annual budget process, the city is required to hold a public hearing. And with the permission of the council, I'm going to give a short presentation that's going to hit the highlights of the F23 budget. And then after I've given my presentation, Mayor, I would ask that you would open the meeting for public comment as we do every year, and see if there's any public comments. And if not, then you would close the comments. And then if council's ready, then at the June 20th meeting, then you would consider adoption. Okay. As I mentioned, I'm very excited to present the proposed budget for this year. As the council members know, one of your most important responsibilities outside of meeting and dealing with constituents is the preparation of the annual budget. It takes the council a great deal of time to go through the document to make sure that you understand what the presentation is. And that all culminated with a work session, a very extensive work session that was held on May 24th, where we actually went through The proposed expenditures has spent a great deal of time on both the operational expenditures as well as the proposed capital budget. Cindy Arnold and I, and also Mr. Tom Cook, are here in case any members of the council have a question. I would like to point out that this is the budget document that we put together for the governing body members. For those in the audience and those in attendance, there is a copy on our website, and what you have to do is just go to the search engine and type in FY 2023, and that will take you to the link that you will click on the finance page. And then from there, you can actually go through the exact same document that the city council members have would be available for the public, including the executive summary. Every single page that is in this book that you receive is also available for the citizens or any interest party to take a look at. So I encourage anyone that's interested to actually take a minute and actually do that, because spending its funds in 2023 if you approve the budget as well as the financial plan for 2024. Quick, the highlights is the things or topics I'm going to go over this evening. Just the budget message, the budget overview, an update on the Broken Arrow Municipal Utility Authority operations capital, a quick comment about our general obligation bond projects, and then answer any questions the council members may have. I always like to start this off because some folks don't know exactly what our cycle is, but every year we operate off of July 1 or June 30th or a fiscal year cycle. We don't operate from January 1st to December 31st. As the council members know, the municipal budget serves the following purposes. It really is a blueprint for providing municipal services for the upcoming fiscal year. We attempt to match available resources with the community's needs, and it outlines the work plan and priorities for the organization. We spend a lot of time throughout the year talking about vision and trying to bring that vision into focus. Obviously, that vision is very flexible based on the needs of the community, but we try to at least frame in various sections of how we'd like to move the community forward. The city has the following priorities when we look at preparing the annual budget. First and foremost, is always maintaining long-term fiscal soundness. I mean, obviously, we have a number of expenses that are ongoing, like personnel costs, as well as other operating costs. So it's very important that when we make decisions with regard to those ongoing costs, that we look at not only the impact that they're going to have this year, but also in the future years, because many of those expenses could be perpetual. Public safety preparedness, as I've said a million times, as the council members have in our city, that's where it starts, where it ends. Comprehensive Economic Development Administration. Obviously, we have two entities that are responsible for Economic Development Administration, and that is to ensure that we have folks working on generation of the fuel needed to do so. Affordable public utilities and ongoing investments in public infrastructure. And it's really all about, whether it's economic development, whether it's public recreation, it's really all about maintaining great quality of life within our community. Our budget book is several hundred pages. I think it's about close in terms of what the budget is this year, and I'll mention that in just a minute. The budget book includes the city manager's executive summary, proposed revenues, expenditures for each fund, and we do have close to 30, if not over 30 different funds. Proposed department budgets, special funds, proposed expenditures, revenues, and fund balances, street maintenance plan, proposed FY 2023 GO bond sale, the proposed Oklahoma Water Resources Board loan program for our water and sewer needs, and then the manual of fees, which the council members will be considering at a later date. When we put the budget together, we really look at key practices of making sure that our revenues and expenditures are conservative. Council members have said, although we've had success each and every year, especially the last 2 years, we still want to take a conservative approach to our budgeting, because once again, looking at those ongoing expenses is very, very important. Ensure all funds balance. We've included built-in contingencies for unexpected or the buildup of reserves, and the administration presented you a budget that's within compliance of the reserve requirements that the council has by policy. And once again, we focus on long-term financial stability. Our budget is really centered around implementation of council's number one ongoing priority, which is great services to the community. And as we've all set up here, is that we try very hard to get to yes. Now, yes isn't always 100% yes. It's always which I believe our residents have in terms of what we expect from the city, because that is our goal, to try to get to yes. And I appreciate the council members' support to make sure that if we need additional people, that you're willing to support that, or if we have to make adjustments in our budgets to continue to get to yes, I really appreciate your help on that. addressed our increasing demands for public infrastructure and public services as part of a growing community. We're seeing tremendous growth within our community, really in all sectors. And as a result of that is that public infrastructure is one of our number one responsibilities, and making sure. And sometimes I think the public doesn't understand is that there's a cost to all that, and balancing what people are willing to pay in property taxes for general obligation bond versus the needs is something that we do constantly. And the next time we're going to get a chance to do that is in 2027. And then maintain a great quality of life. So moving on with respect to the budget, I always like to show this slide first, because some folks when they go to a local store and they spend $100 and it's $108, they always say, why is that city tax so high? They think that $8 they're paying for all the city. Well, in fact, it's not. Only about 3 and 3.55 of that 8.4 in Tulsa County or 8.8 in Widener County goes to the city for us to be able to operate. So this year, our proposed budget is $311,373,303. This represents overall a 2.6% increase over FY 2022, which was $3,420,407. So if you break this down operationally, it was right at $142 million, which represents about a 9% increase over the previous year of $130 million. Our capital outlay is actually down by about 3% to $136 million. And then obviously we have debt service that we have to pay for the loans that we've taken out predominantly for our general obligation bond package, Oklahoma Water Resources Board. So we have a total of $311,373,303. The general fund, which really consists of many of the services we provide outside of public safety, in fact, all of the services outside of public safety and utilities, as proposed this year, is just over $121 million. And this includes the expenditures, transfers out, and the ending fund balances. Last year, we were at $110 million, almost $111 million. Once again, it's a 9.4% increase. We are including a cost of living increase for our employees, as well as we've anticipated the increase in the cost of doing business as a result of where we are with the economy, the cost of gasoline, for example, as well as our ability to receive cash. Total revenues for FY 2023, this is for the general fund, is right at $79 million. This represents about a 9% increase over last year. However, although we saw a great improvement over the previous year, we're still only projecting about a 1.5% estimate and about 2% on, actually 1.5% for sales tax and 2% on all other revenues. Now, the good thing about this, that if the economy continues to be positive, all that money goes into the respective funds. For example, we're required to provide the police department about a little over 36% of all, fire department about 30.3 or so. So if we have required by ordinance per the vote of the people to put that money into their fund, which is available for future years, as well as any increases that the projection that would go back into our fund balance that we could use for future years. Actually, those are funds that would be used to continue to pay for our budget going forward. The council did authorize, at my, you'll notice there are about a dozen new. We're going to see 4 dispatchers, new dispatchers, also a dispatcher supervisor. There are several what I would call support staff positions, because obviously you have out there. Those people are limited in what they can do in many cases. Have the folks on the back end that are actually helping them in various respects. And you can see IT did very well this year, as well as which will benefit the authority as well as the entire organization with the additional help in areas of information technology. Parks always needs help with the growing community. Horticulture is something very, very important about beautification is extremely important. Community development inspector, that's no surprise with the growth that we're having in our areas. Also a part-time engineer, which will help in community development. And as the council talked about at the work session, is we have 157 police officers that are authorized in the budget. However, because of the ebb and flow of hirings and retirements, we're down 11 positions right now. And so at the chief's recommendation, working with the police union, I've recommended to 2 academies over the next 2 years to anticipate the retirements that we'll have in order to get us and the chief 157 police officers. And so I think this will help us, and actually I believe it'll get us ahead in terms of making sure we got a full complement of police officers to be able to provide great services to our city. And then there's going to be in a pilot program, a temporary increase in the number of employees per shift in the fire department. We have 53 right now. We're going to take it for the next year to 55 to see what that does in terms of helping us meet the operational needs. And if in fact that turns out to be, as the chief recommends to me, then that may be something we may look to add those 6 positions permanently. And that's also going to help us because, once again, there are retirements, and we don't always know when those retirements are going to happen. So once again, in order to meet the expectations of our community, to assist those already here, we're going to have to add some additional folks. Sales tax capital improvement fund. This represents a 0.5 cent of our 3.55. And this is a dedicated fund that has to be used for capital improvement type projects. Revenue is estimated this year that we'd be able to spend at about $9.6 million. We typically use this as pay-as-you-go capital, except for the note for Bass Pro, which we know now will pay off in about 3.5 years. And we'll be making a recommendation in the coming years on how we would recommend we would use those funds. The proposed expenditures are on page 167 to 173 of the budget book. And I'm mentioning that because anyone that comes back and watches this, they'd be able to go right to see those expenditures. And those expenditures are essentially a breakdown of each department that got their funds. So I think it's a good program, and I'd encourage folks to go take a look at those proposed expenditures. Now, one of the highlights of the budget session always is hearing Rocky Hinkle talk about how much money he's going to spend in street maintenance funds every year, because obviously the voters repurposed a portion of that vision tax. And I'm proud to say is that based on revenues that come in, looks like Rocky's going to have about $4.7 million from the street maintenance fund to be able to work. Now, if you add that to the $2.5 million from the general obligation bond package, Rocky and his team, as well as engineering construction, is going to have about $6.2 million to spend on road maintenance throughout the community. And what we're going to do this year, and I'm excited to announce this to the council, is, we have the Thrive edition that actually talks about different services. We're actually going to create a micro version of the Thrive about our streets and roads. So we're actually going to break it down to talk about anything from a welcome letter to me about why we're doing this, and to actually what roads we're going to do and why we do this. Why does it take 3 years to complete a road project? And we're going to be doing these every single year. But instead of sending it out to every household, we're going to send a postcard with the QR code on it, where people become used to doing that, because going to restaurants, to save money, we're going to send the card out so folks can actually go online and they can actually look at the street maintenance report. And anytime someone has a question on social media about what the city's doing, communications or you all can refer them right to that report, because that's going to show them what we're tentatively going to be spending on our money on this coming fiscal year for street and road improvements. So Rocky talked about the special fund. He also listed very succinctly a breakdown of how we're going to spend those dollars. And what is exciting about this year's recommendation is he's recommended that we spend $500,000 to upgrade our pavement condition index report, which is the report which he works off of, and he makes recommendations to me and ultimately me to the council on what roads we do. We do it very scientifically based on the condition of those roads and trying to keep our PCI above 70. What's good about this report is he's recommended that we expand it to not only include streets and roads, but also sidewalks and curbs. So as we begin to move into the 2027 bond package, connectivity is a big thing for the administration and the city council. We'll have to be able to include funds more than we did this in 2018 to be able to work on that connectivity and to upgrade or replace some of those areas where connectivity has been lost. So moving into the Broken Arrow Municipal Utility Authority, this year the proposed budget is a little over $34 million. Last year's was a $43 million, almost $44 million. This is a 6% decrease in operating cost capital outlay, mainly because of a smaller amount of capital projects that we will be doing this year versus last year, or the year that just ended. Now, in the budget highlights, obviously a rate increase is necessary to pay improvements and the OWRB debt service. I mean, things the council has been really good at, obviously, is making sure that we take care of our infrastructure. It's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And as you all know, do I need to mention County Line Road, sewer line? Okay. It has a life expectancy. And what Kenny and his team has been really good at, and Chuck Vokes has been amazing, is identifying those areas that we need to make reinvestments in. And so there's $19 million worth of projects that we're going to be asking you to consider sometime during the fiscal year to help maintain that infrastructure. The proposed OWRB, it's on page 247, but I did include what we'll be asking the council to include for the rate increase for the first year of the new 5-year rate model, which is essentially the same increase that we had in the current year. With regard to general obligation bond projects, I'm pleased to say that right now in some phase of construction, we have almost $50 million from the 2011-14 and 2018 GEO bonds respectively in construction cycle. And the council actually gets the opportunity to improve for this year, $43 million to be spent. And right here is a breakdown. And I want to mention what page this is on because it's really good. It's really cool. Is this $43 million is broken down into various propositions from Proposition 1 to Proposition number 5. And if you go to page 246 of the budget, you'll actually be able to see the specific projects. And what is exciting about that package is there's a whole bunch of east-west roads being proposed in that project, in this $43 million, such as we're going to continue Washington from Olive to Aspen. We're going to be looking at Houston from Garnett to Aspen. We're going to be looking at both of those. That's very, very exciting. There's many other projects that were also in there, some projects to the north. So lots of things are happening. Last year, we spent a lot of time working on design, right-of-way. Ethan's team did. And so there's going to be a lot of orange cones throughout the year, and we're going to have to time these because there's so much work to be done. But I'm very excited about the fact that we're going to be moving our community forward. On pages 15 through 20, actual proposed 2023 work plan, and it's broken down into communications and transparency, economic development administration initiatives, our new street maintenance program, approved BAMA projects, and various programs and initiatives. Once again, having a vision is extremely important. I was talking to Michael Gordon before the meeting, and he attended the budget workshop and was talking about how much he appreciated the fact that the council spent a lot of time talking about the future and how we're going to get there. And essentially, this is what the work plan outlines, and this is what the document actually says in terms of the service we provide is where do we see Broken Arrow going and what initiatives are important. And if you can get a good snapshot, obviously nothing is etched in stone. It's ultimately up to the council members. If you look at pages 15 through 28, you can get a good idea of some of the most important things to be working on. And once again, there's a lot of initiatives that we're looking at that are actually just ways of trying to make this a better place to live, work, and raise a family. So in closing remarks, we built a conservative focus that will help ensure Broken Arrow continues to provide the level of services that residents desire while maintaining the modest tax implications taxpayers have come to expect. I believe the initiatives and spending priorities recommended in this budget submission reflect not only the goals of the City Council, but also the priorities of the residents and the taxpayers of Broken Arrow. Now, when you put together a budget like this, there's many recognitions. I want to start with the council members because I know each one of you went through that budget because of the questions that you asked me at the meeting as well as before the meeting. And I know that you know it well enough because you like to have yourself prepared. So if somebody asks you, you can generally, here's where you can find it, or here's what the city is spending. So I thank you for your time and effort. And Cindy and her team and Tom, that's amazing. All the directors, they know they're not going to get everything they asked for, but they're very good about prioritizing. And I appreciate that because I'd like to give them everything they asked for, but there's no unlimited ATM. Okay. Because we have a really good, healthy fund balance, there are some people that believe that we do have an unlimited team, but we don't. So the directors are very, very good at making sure that they prioritize their expenditures because they know we can only spend so much in order to sustain the budget. So I commend all the directors. I commend Cricket and Michaela for their help in putting everything together. And also this year, Aubrey from Communications did, oh my gosh, if you see, when you go online and you actually look at the budget message, and it's like you're reading a book, the way that she has put that together with Aaron's help. So I just want to recognize her and Aaron's team for that. So I'll be glad to answer any questions the council has.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but it's difficult if you come up with a list of street projects to try to stay up with it. By the time you go out and look at it, it's already done. Got to go back and find out another street project. Rocky's crew, as I was kidding him the other day, I was going to mention that. I don't know how he stays up with it because his crew's gone so fast. So it's a good job. And that's one that the citizens really look at and they really see those projects. So it makes us look good overall.
I don't have any questions tonight because the staff did such a great job at our work session the other night and answered our questions. And I think that's important for everyone to understand. I think they watch this meeting and they see us not asking a lot of questions. I'm thinking, are they doing their job? Well, go back and watch the work session because we spent 4 hours going through this almost line by line, working through it and lots of questions. So, which goes to the point of how well our directors and our staff do to put this together so that we can educate ourselves and make wise decisions about the financial expenditures. So I echo the city manager's compliments and thanks because it's a big job. It is every year and it just seems to get bigger.
I just love a government that balances its budget and staff that are very cognizant of the people's money. It's a really awesome thing. And before I finish, my computer locked up, so someone will have to come up here. It like totally crashed, and so I had to sign out, but so someone else to log me back in.
Well, I will just say this, but obviously it's not rainbows and unicorns in everything we do. We have challenges. Basically, Life Right is a challenge, making sure that we sustain our revenues going forward, meeting the expectations residents have about capital improvements. And so we spend a lot of time. Water and sewer, as the council members know, we're looking at long-range plans, which means those are going to, in order to meet the expectations. And so Kenny Schwab spends an incredible amount of time, and so does Norm, trying to determine how best to go forward. And I'm just very happy that we have folks that are looking not only today, but also into the future about where Broken Arrow is going to be. And at some day when we all transition out, we want to leave those people that come behind us with a plan. And I think that we're doing that.
Well, I'd like to comment too. I try never to get this too close to his time for his evaluation. But the city manager does an excellent job of tying this all together. And the first time that he even come up with, the budget, and budget we look at as one of our primary jobs. You could tell after you read the first 4 or 5 pages what all was in the budget. So he outlines it just like a good teacher would do, what I'm going to teach you, and then you teach you, and then they give you a review. That's what I taught you. So he really makes it easy for the council to go through after he's taken all of his great staff information and put it together. So he does an excellent job and makes it easy for us.
Indeed. I remember after the work session, I asked John, I was like, is it always this way? I mean, it has been since I've been on council, but before then, had it always been this way? And they're like,
No.
so.
No.
So, thank you, guys.
Thank you, folks.
So we need to call the public hearing. We're going to open a public hearing. Okay. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this item? Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this item? Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this item? Okay. I'll close the public hearing for item 7F or A.
And we'll vote on that the 20th. Is that correct?
Because by law, we have to have it in place by then, right?
Yes, Mayor, by June 30th.
Just kind of an important item.
Yes. Thanks for pointing that out. And there are no citizens signed up to speak on item 8. Item 9A, consideration, discussion, and possible direction to the administration relative to approaching the Museum Broken Arrow regarding the possibility of adding members of the city council or appointed designee to their board. City manager.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. As the council members know, over the last, I would say, 6 months, each of you have expressed to me a desire to have a discussion about having a representative from the city council on the boards where we have user groups where we have facilities. And I think we've systematically gone about ensuring that there's representation because of the building. It's really about relationship building. It's our facility. We let folks use those through a use agreement. And the council members have just said that they feel like they'd like to build those relationships to help them because of the fact that it is our building, and that we working together, if there's issues and concerns, the council members have firsthand knowledge of working with those boards and how we can better serve them, because the mission that each one of them have is an important part of the quality of life that we have in our city. And if you look at whether it's the new Veterans Building, whether it's the Military History Center, the Senior Center, there is representation. And the last one that we need to have a discussion about, and I need direction, is our museum. It's an important part of our organization. It's got a great group of folks that are on the board, and we have the president here this evening, and I'd really like to hear from the council so I can go visit with her and the other executive committee members to find out what your desire is to have basically representation from the city. And I will tell you that on March 21st, when I first put this on, I put 2 because that was consistent, and that was just mine, just to be clear. That was my thought, just based on the discussion we had just had about the senior center. And so I put it on there knowing that the council members may not desire to have 2, but maybe they only want 1 person. But I couldn't attend that meeting, so I wasn't able to actually explain to you why I titled it that way. But really, it was just to have a discussion to see if there was interest based on my individual conversations, because we hadn't had a conversation about it as a group. So I just want to make sure that you knew that. And so tonight, what I'm looking for is the council majority interested in having one of your members, me approaching them about serving, or I will tell you that Kenny Schwab currently serves on the board. Or would you prefer that it be, or the count in this particular case or going forward, could it be a designee? And if it is, based on our form of government, I believe that designee should be, it either be myself or someone I designate to be consistent with our form of government. So I really just need some direction on what council would like, so I can go visit with the executive committee and see what their concerns are or what their opportunities are. Hopefully they would look at it as a positive, because that's what it is. And then we could work together to find, to meet everyone's expectations and work together on it.
You know, I would comment that that we, in nearly all the organizations that we're involved with, we're really involved with. You take the National League of Cities, Oklahoma Municipal League, we have representation on those. Anytime that we give anybody money, we have representatives on that. Chamber of Commerce, see Jennifer out here. You know, we have representatives on the mayor and city manager on their boards. And also we ask them, and every year they make a presentation of where the money is spent, how it's going to be, where the future is going to lie. And those are things that we need. We represent the citizens of Broken Arrow, and we need to be good stewards of their money. And I believe all the councilmen have echoed that. I will say that I don't think that we need 2 representatives on each one. I know I pushed for 2 on the senior board, and there's a good reason for that. If you look through the senior board and their contract, they have a lot more involved than what they are with the other facilities. They have 2 facilities that's going to run. I tried to get a price, and I couldn't get the amount of the different buildings, but it's going to be a total of probably more than $5 million. We pay the salaries of several of their individuals, over $100,000 a year. Their utilities run higher. So I just feel like they needed to, and they really need to expand in the future to meet the demands of our senior population. But that doesn't mean that I feel like that needs to be 2 on each one. So I think 1 is fine. But I really think it needs to be a council person, just develop that relationship with them. That's just my feeling. Kenny is a key employee here. I wouldn't want anything that would cause any type of conflict between and he also oversees the park department, which oversees all of these areas. So I think he would be great, and he's a great leader in the community. But I want to make sure he stays firm in the job that he has here. If we need for him to serve for a while, that's fine. But I do feel like it needs to be a council person on these boards. I will say, you say we had representative. In looking at the contracts, and I have a copy of the contracts, I believe, I always thought the mayor was on the Military History Museum and the Veterans Center Board. And that's not on the contract. They don't even list it on their contract. So I think the staff really needs to look at that and see. I noticed that she is on the Veterans Center, but she's a non-voting member. So we need to decide whether that councilman, we're not trying to change anything on their boards. If one person changes the direction of the whole board, then I question there's something wrong with the board. I mean, they might have input, but no offense to the mayor, because I thought she was a voting member. It says that she's not a voting member on that. So I think the staff really needs to look at those contracts to kind of coordinate all that activities with it, because I think you need to be a voting member on that, really take active part of it.
That's good.
That's my feeling on it.
I totally agree I think I say at every single meeting that I feel we're stewards of, it's the people's money. And so anything that we are giving funds to, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the citizens to have somebody from council on all these different boards, not so we can have some ego trip about, I certainly don't need one more thing to do. And by the way, I do not want to be on this board. And I'm not sure if I'm going to leave it that or not. I'll so much to say, so many things to say. But let's just put it this way. I never have wanted to be on this board. And I think there was an issue about that. And that was never, so y'all are good that are watching that didn't come to the meeting tonight.
You're going to be a good senior center board member.
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy that.
Yes,
I'm
you will
going to
be.
enjoy that.
You'll be good for the senior board.
I'm almost a senior.
Well, I'll just say with regard to Kenny, I'm just glad Kenny's lived here pretty much his whole life. And so I'm grateful that they contacted him and they asked him to serve, because that's just another, just like Ina, basically just someone else from this community giving back, which I appreciate. And Kenny and I had a conversation. In order to insulate him, because of his position, I basically informed him is that if there's a request that he normally would handle through his staff, he needs to come to talk about me first. That way it can't be seen that he's on there to benefit them by the nature of his position. That gives him the insulation that he needs to make sure that at least he has to tell him, look, I need to go check with the city manager. It's not that I'm trying to be dictatorial. It's just that I just feel like that's the best way to do it. And so there isn't any appearances that he was put on there for some other reason.
Well, he's pivotal to the city of Broken Arrow.
We can't survive without you, Kenny.
I'm trying to figure out if it's concrete or
I was just going to say the concrete, you pour regular concrete next to each other, you're not going to be able to match them a lot of times.
Your mic's not on, so we can't hear your brilliance, by the way. I'm going to have a different take. I've always had a different take on this. I've not been excited about adding city council members to boards by requirement. Every board that has a city councilor on it, they served on the board before. That their role as a city councilor was secondary and not. They weren't there by virtue of being city councilors.
I got mine on because once I was elected. Both of them.
No, I'm talking about Arts OK, the museum, the Military History Museum. You were on there because of your support for the at the Military Museum. You were on there because of your support for the military and the veterans. I'm on Arts OK because of my support of the arts, not because I was a city councilor. I was on there before I was on the city council. I served on the senior board before I was a member of the city council. So I'm a little uncomfortable with this by requiring telling them who has to be on their board.
Well, we're not telling them who has to be.
No,
on the
but
board.
we are. We're not telling them who of the five has to be on the board, but we're telling them that one of the five has to be on the board. I'm a little uncomfortable with that. I just feel like it's a kind of big government. But having said that, if that is the majority feel, then I think that I think we, each actually, technically, the museum board isn't the museum board. It's the Historical Society board that operates the museum, just for clear purposes. But here, if that's the direction we're going, then as the vice mayor said, I don't think we have the right to tell them who among the 5 should serve on their board. They should be able to choose who it is, and understanding that they may elect to tell us not that they don't wish to have a member of the city council, and then we have decisions to make by virtue of that. I mean, that's just, we can't by fiat require that. Well, we can, but they don't have to accept that. And if they choose not to, then we have another discussion to have. So I'm just,
Right.
I've gone through this several times in my mind, and the senior center to me was entirely different because of the fact that we actually pay them money for staffing. It's not just using the facility; it's paying money for staffing and other things. And there's also a discussion being had about how we continue to offer our senior center, our seniors, the types of services we offer. The other boards, I'm just uncomfortable with us telling them that they have to do this. But if that is the majority of the council feels that that's appropriate, I can support that. I'm just sharing my discomfort with it. But I don't think we have, if that is a recommendation we make to the city manager, I'm uncomfortable saying you have to pick, as Christy said, I don't think we should tell them who among the 5 of us would serve. That should be up to them. And I think we're going to have to understand that at some point, one of these organizations could tell us no, because Art's okay. I know the Veterans Center does have that in their articles, that they would have a member of the council. I think the mayor, I'd have to go back and look at that, but because I've slept since then.
Yeah, the Veterans Center does
The
have.
Veterans Center does,
But
but the military,
Does
the
not.
Military History Center does. Arts OK, which does Arts 302, until they're modified. Neither does the Senior Center, for that matter. So these are things that I'm a little uncomfortable with the precedent that this is established.
Well, I'd still prefer it that way, a councilman on that. I think it helps them and us both. But if I'm wrong and they don't want, maybe there are alternatives. I made the comment about Jennifer as she's leaving, about the chamber making the presentation. And it takes about 30 minutes to an hour for her to make her presentation where the money is spent. So maybe they would have an alternative there if they decided to make a presentation, and that would bring them before the council, because we do need to be good stewards. And then if we've had questions that the citizens have asked, the way the makeup of the board of directors, different questions, we could ask them at that time. I just think it would be more, I think it would look better for us to have a member on that board. We're not changing anything.
And there are benefits to
And I
having a
have,
council.
when you use the word big government sitting next to me, I
I did
had
that
a
on purpose.
visceral reaction. So big government would be us saying that we have more than like a board seat. I mean, we're not asking for anything extra. We're not asking for extra votes. We just want a seat at the table because of our responsibility as government, as the people, because we have the responsibility of the people's money. We're just asking for a seat at the table so we can make sure that we just know what's going on. Big government would be, I want to have authority over
And by
this.
having a vote, we have an authority.
No, we don't have, because our one vote is nothing
But
if we don't have other agreement.
But what we're saying is we do have a vote that is, and the ability to persuade, to argue, we do have the ability to affect change as an elected member, and that's fine.
But we don't have executive power over it. I mean, we can't make an executive order over the museum or whatever board we're sitting on.
If we,
Well,
if
in
we,
Deborah's case, in the Veterans Center, which I didn't know, that she doesn't have the power to vote.
Yeah.
Did you,
And-
do you vote?
Uh,
Whoops.
Say no,
I'll-
you
I'll
don't have
withdraw
the
that
power.
You know,
I don't have the power.
yeah, she refuses to answer on the grounds that she can't remember whether she voted.
Johnny, I don't have the power.
But I'm just, big government's an eye of the beholder. I think we can all agree to that. It kind of depends on how big you want it to be or how involved you are. I'm just saying, and I'm just saying it kind of has that feel because there's, these boards are responsive to us. If we go and we say, we need to know where you're spending it, they will provide us financials. They will give us that information. And if we ask them to come in and report to us, they would come in and report to us. We've done that with the museum. We've done that with Arts OK. We've done that with the senior center. So that we've even had other groups that we don't serve on, like the libraries, come in and will tell us here's what we're spending our money on. Here's what we're doing, because we do pay certain, some of our tax dollars go county-wise to pay for those things. So we can
difference
get
is we
that
have a
information.
building.
We can get that information, and we have a lease with that. So I'm just expressing my discomfort, and I'm explaining why. You can discount it or not, but I'm expressing my discomfort with it and explaining why.
And I don't feel like it's big government as long as they're taking our money. If they want to pay rent for the building and pay for the utilities, then I think, and then we say we
Right.
want to be on the board, that would, to me, would be big government. But as long as we have our citizens' money involved in all of that, I feel like, I don't think we need 2 city councilors, but I think 1 city councilor, I think needs to be, that's 1 vote. I don't know how big their board is, but
I'm just
That's-
saying that we can maintain oversight in different ways.
We could say that about everything.
Mhm.
So,
So I did.
well, remember, you're setting a precedent by saying that. So we have a lot of differencing ideas.
Well, I'd like to see us getting forward consistent, because these buildings are gonna be here for many years. You know what I mean? As far as their contracts are concerned, what respond, if you wanna have a council on there and not let them vote, you know what I mean? I disagree with that, but I don't have any problem with it. It's worked well in this time, and Deborah knows everything that goes on at that point, because she goes to all the meetings. As long as we're assured they're invited to all the meetings, that representative. You know, we haven't mentioned it, but you got Michaela. Is she hid somewhere in here?
she is back there.
Yeah, there she is. She always hides behind somebody. You got Michaela, who is actually the liaison, that if they have an issue, and it gets back to the deal with Kenny, that if they have a issue, and I know this particular one that we're talking about tonight, they really have problems, and I visited with them, maybe rightfully so, on the maintenance. I think there's a big discrepancy of who provides what maintenance where, and the city's not providing the maintenance. So that's something that I told them they need to visit with Michaela, and with the Parks Department representative, Kenny, or whoever that is, visit with them. So that would just make the council aware of that situation. So they still have Michaela, I believe, on all of these boards to be there, to be a liaison for information, carry information back and forth. I just think it's good to have a council on there, but if they don't want it, before we would kick them out, I think that we could work out something, and they can make a presentation the way the chamber does, which is very enlightening, with their handouts, and we know exactly where the money is spent.
Well,
And we have members on their boards.
if there's an issue, like a question about, like, who does the maintenance, wouldn't that have been solved if there was a city councilor on the board? They would
Well,
know.
but if you're a counselor legally, then who you're going to take it, you don't even take it to Kenny, you take it, or the
City
Parks
manager.
Department,
Right,
you have to take it to city manager.
right.
And usually it gets taken quickly at that.
No, there are
I know,
benefits to
exactly.
having a city councilor, and that's what I express. I know the mayor and I sat in on a meeting and discussed this. There are benefits serving on. I know that the veterans would say they get a great benefit from having the mayor on their board, because if there's an issue, she has a pipeline to the city manager.
And the city,
Arts OK would tell you, I think, that they like having, I think they would, they like having me on the board, because we've had issues come up, and when they come up, well, I'm texting the city manager saying here. So there are benefits. I think it's wise for the museum to have a counselor on the board. I absolutely do.
Uh-huh.
I'm just uncomfortable telling them they have to. Okay, that's
Well,
the
if they
line.
have an alternative, and we're saying they could have an alternative, I'm not sure I'd rather have it. I'd rather have a counselor on the board. The senior board gets mad at me when they tell me some of this stuff, because I just tell them to tell Michaela. Or I tell Michaela, because that's actually her job. And I
Right.
told Sean that several times. That's Michaela's job, is to take care of that. So don't keep her from doing her job. That she would do that. But I still feel like there needs to be, anytime we own the property, we've got a lot invested in it, that we would have a counselor on that board. And I'd prefer a voting member, but it doesn't have to be, because it can affect them. I know in the senior center, what do we have now? 9, 10, 11 people on the board. My vote never has mattered one way or the other, or carrying anything. But at least I know everything that's going on.
Well, and when we first discussed it, I thought, well, that makes sense, and it's something that would I thought would be good, especially if there was someone on the council that's kind of passionate about our history, which I think we all are. But I didn't know Kenny was on there either. Kenny now, so in a way, I feel we are represented, and so I kind of go both ways on that one, having a counselor on there now.
I'm
But we won't
uncom-
always.
Right.
I mean, they might not always be. Like, you'll always be at the city.
I mean, I'm with keeping Kenny there as it is. I'm also, like I said, if the majority of the board, if the majority of the council's desires is to go this way, I'm not going to, take my toys, go home. And I think, I frankly am perplexed as to why they wouldn't want to have a counselor on.
I think that was.
But
the
that's
biggest-
certainly
yeah.
they get to make that decision. I'm just, like I said, telling any entity because we had discussions with the senior board establishing why and had buy-in from the board. We didn't have to tell them because it was by agreement.
Yeah, the disruption that it caused was a little concerning
Yeah.
because we had never had that before.
So really, what we're voting on is whether to amend the use agreement to that one or two counselors would be.
No, Vice Mayor, really, it's just for you to say, just give me a direction that you would like. Somebody make a
Further
motion,
conversation.
hypothetically, someone make a motion that said, I make a motion that city manager, and probably I need elected official go with me. So let's say hypothetically, the mayor, go visit with the executive committee about a member of the governing body serving one member, I've heard one member of the governing body, or a designee, someone that I would appoint to serve on their board.
Well, and I think the question we're having here is do we, at least, I would never want to put words in anyone's mouth, but the question in my mind was, first and foremost, do we want a representative on the board? And then secondly, do we want that representative to be a city councilor, or do we want to have a designee? I think it needs to be one or the other, or else it could lead to some confusion.
Yep, you're correct. Just need some direction. And then if after that conversation, then I'd come back and tell the council members, give an update on exactly what was discussed and the position of the board.
Could we make it to where, because city councilors are typically very busy in the community on lots of different boards and working jobs and all those things. And so can it be either or, that city councilor, or because what if a city councilor wants, they're like, yeah, I'd really like to serve on the board. And instead of Kenny doing it, your designee would be a city councilor.
Like if Kenny decides that after a year or two that he wants to move on or something.
Right.
Yeah, council can adjust their policy.
My only thought is, and I hope nobody takes this the wrong way, but so staff sometimes comes and goes. So people retire, people go to different jobs. So if we're always saying, we have staff and we've never said a city councilor will be, I just feel like this puts something permanent that, just in case there might be staff that don't want to do it. I guess if you make it their job, yes, but it still goes back to, we're the ones that, when it comes down to it, vote on the money. So,
Well, I think the city manager, if you had to, It could be a counselor or the city manager or his designate, whoever he designates to do that. I think that would leave it, you know what I mean? I think the city council would have an option to, if they wanted to be on it, they could be on it. If not, if the city manager doesn't have the time for it, if he wants to designate somebody, maybe the organization has somebody in the community that they would want to designate and the council would approve it. Because even if he designated somebody, it would be approval of the council, I would think.
But isn't that, and see, to me right now, we're not just talking about the Broken Arrow Museum. This is all the user agreements we're talking about. This just happens to be what's before us. So, but isn't the whole point that as council, we're responsible for the money, not a designee out there someplace that is responsible.
That's a very good point.
I mean, I can't, thank you. I'm like, we're getting in the weeds here. And I mean, either we're going to do this or we're not. I mean, it's just like.
Well, I can tell you is that in the discussion that we had, when I say we, the mayor, Councilor Udi and I, there was at least one member of the executive committee on the museum that's not in favor of a council member being on the board.
Me?
No, there was a member of the
Yeah.
museum board that said they don't want a council member on.
Well,
the
that's
board.
good. You know, usually if the boards are not split some way, you're not really making a decision. I say the same thing about a council. If
Right.
we're not splitting the decision some way. So you're not going to find probably anything everybody's going to agree on.
I know
And
we have-
were responsible for the citizens that come and complain about something and responsible for the building and for the money, paying for the utilities. So,
And I
I
know
think
we have
we
a
have
lot of
all
unanimous
responsibility.
votes, but a lot of times, even in the unanimous votes, there's a lot of discussion and a lot of,
exactly.
like tonight, where we have an opportunity to address our concerns and express our.
I don't know of one other entity the city works with that has any issue with a council member being involved, well,
I don't
albeit as a liaison, ex officio, or an actual board member. And that's why for this particular board, I just want direction to know what the council wants, because there are concerns about a council member being on the museum board. I don't understand it. And ultimately, if it's not a positive reaction, you can address it when it comes time for the user agreement, when it comes up.
I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and make a motion then that you have that meeting and discuss whatever you just said earlier. I'll make that motion.
One counselor.
One council.
One counselor.
So council, vice mayor's making a motion to add to direct city manager to add one council member. Scott is very eloquent in what he says. One council, he might vote no, so he may not be the person to make the motion. What would it be, Trevor? Help me out here.
What motion am I making?
So if I'm understanding the vice mayor's concern, it is, and motion, if I'm understanding the conversation, it is to authorize the city manager to approach the museum board and discuss the addition of a city councilor to their board.
Correct. One city council member.
Okay.
Yes.
And
I
I'd
make that
like the
motion.
mayor to go with me.
I'll second.
I'll third it.
I have a motion in 2 seconds. Roll call.
1 second.
That was painful. Motion passes. All right, item 9B, consideration, discussion, and possible approval of Broken Arrow City Council ward boundaries based on 2020 U.S. Census and authorize the drafting of a resolution and ordinance accepting the same.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager, and staff. Statutorily, the city currently has 4 ward boundaries for the 4 council and then 1 councilman at large. The current ward boundaries were approved about approximately 10, 11 years ago, as we do after every decennial census. The ordinance that currently has our existing ward boundaries shown on the Ward 1 being on the northeast side, Ward 2 is on the northwest side, Ward 3 is on the southwest side of the city, and Ward 4 is the east and the southeast side of the city. The U.S. Census population figures were released recently, a few months ago, and our April 2020 population was 113,540, which is almost an increase of 15,000 people over the last census, which is almost a 15% increase in our population. As you all know, and within this report, we've written a lot of background on ward boundaries being redrawn as needed after decennial censuses. So currently, Broken Arrow is the 4th largest city, and we've included some demographic information in your packet as well. And we're the 267th largest city in the country. The ward boundary redistricting criteria, and I won't go through all of the individual items that are listed in there, are fairly obvious. Some of them are statutory by federal law and previous actions. Some are statutory by state law. And then the city of Broken Arrow over the last many decades has adopted our own guidelines, which I'm pretty happy about that we've stuck with over the last many number of years. Our ward boundaries have been concise. They've been on arterial streets. Very rarely they've gone beyond the arterial streets. They have maintained a percentage deviation of approximately 5% or less. And the national standard is almost 10 to 12%. And our city population, based even on our growth, has been evenly distributed in quadrants of 25%. And we have stayed within close proximity of our ward boundaries previously done. About 2 months ago, the council approved a 5-person advisory panel. We met with them at length and discussed several different options. And I won't go through each and every option, but this is our current boundary and precincts. There's a lot of geography involved when you start shifting these lines and precinct shifts and so forth. But again, this is the current information. The plan before us being proposed by the advisory panel and staff is option A, or plan A is what we've recommended. After studying 4 or 5 different options, we've labeled them in the background as option A, B, C, D, and so forth. By the way, the current deviation, if you stay with the current deviation, is well over 12%, which is a little bit beyond the acceptable boundaries. So to bring that number down close to 5%, the advisory committee, along with our staff and a couple of other people, recommended option A. Now, based on the 2020 population, the deviation of that proposal is 5.6%, the deviation being the growth patterns in our city over the last decade or two and over the next few years are favoring ward boundary district number 3 and 1. So to accommodate for that, we overcompensated and accommodated the figures to the 5.6%, which is already in the last, and with our projections over the next 20 will come down to 4 to perhaps between 3%. So as the decade progresses, statistically, we'll be fairly even for the rest of the decade. The next redistricting will be about 10 or 11 years from now. So option A is what is being recommended by the board and our staff. I will go into the details as you may want to and answer any particular questions. Included in your package towards the end is the demographic growth and the historical growth of the city as well. One thing I might add, because a question had come up recently about some jurisdictions based on the type of government require geographic equalization as well. Municipal governments such as ours, based on our state statutes, geographically, we do not have to have equalization done for ward boundaries. Currently, Ward 1 has approximately 15 square miles. Ward 2, which is the most compact and most mature and fully developed ward, approximately fully developed ward, is 9 square miles. Ward 3 has 13. And Ward 4, which is the largest geographical ward right now, is approximately 24 square miles.
So if we adopt this, there's more people who can run against me in April.
Yes. And there was a good discussion when you look at the 2020 figures, how our growth is happening in this decade and where it's happening is pretty obvious. One of the maps that is included in our packets, the committee requested staff to show where the hotspots were on growth. So we did a map and study of that map that showed this particular map with the red dots showed the deviation of where the growth circles were. The yellow district, which was accommodated, is a full compact 9 square mile on the west side of northwest side of the city, and so forth. So again, demographically, some of us know the growth that's happening in these areas, so we accommodated and compensated for that with the proposal.
Looks like to me everyone wants to live in Ward 2, but I'm just saying.
I won't go through all the
Growth
options.
is
There were
Ward
several
3.
options that we discussed, and they're all in there. Also included is the previous decades of how the council have approved and the deviations that we've had, all listed. This particular map shows the chart of the entire history of Broken Arrow over the last 110 years. And we can see the trends that are progressing.
Well, I really appreciate the panel's work. I know NCOG provides a lot of the data, but the panel has to plow through it, make these recommendations. And I knew it wouldn't necessarily be a fun job. So those who served on it, I really appreciate that work, because it kind of has political tensions, because, I mean, I jokingly said that, but it does. It has. So having a nonpartisan group look at this and give us positive recommendations, I found to be very helpful. I mean, I think I actually went through each one of them, of the proposals, and I personally agree with the panel's recommendation, because Plan A did make the most sense with regard to where the growth is, in regard to the way our community's boundaries or patterns are changing. And I guess because of that, I'll make a motion to approve the Plan A as submitted by the panel.
We have a second?
I'll second.
A motion and second, roll call. Thank you.
Is Scott still in my ward? Or my
Yes,
Scott's
you're
ward?
still.
I lost
You're my
I
skill
lost Indian
councilman?
Springs.
You lost Indian Springs?
Yep.
And just for brief clarification, there will be a resolution and an ordinance that will subsequently be brought before the body.
Thank you.
You're just reviewing that.
Just for voting, but.
Does it becomes an ordinance then? Or-
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to preview ordinances, item 10A, consideration, discussion, and possible preview of an ordinance amending the Broken Arrow Code of Ordinances, Chapter 7, Business Regulations and Licenses, Wrecker Services, more specifically changing vehicle impoundment procedures. Chief Berryhill. Or whichever Dennis.
If I may, I apologize.
Yes.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, the item that's before you is just a small change to operating rules and regulation requirements for our record services. Currently, our ordinance requires that the record driver has to verify by their signature the inventory that's been made and who's there on the site. My understanding is that they're moving to a new computer-aided dispatch system that will not have the signature aspect of it on site, but it would allow and change it so that the record driver provides their name to the police officer on on the vehicle impound sheet that will then be accomplished through the new program. I know the police chief is here to talk about any, technical questions that you may have about it, but that's in a nutshell what the change is. Happy to answer any questions or to turn it over to the chief if you have any questions.
Do you have any questions for either?
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance and set for adoption.
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Roll call. Motion passes. Item 10B, consideration, discussion, and possible preview of an ordinance amending the Broken Arrow Code of Ordinances, Chapter 24, Water, Sewers, and Sewage Disposal.
Chuck Oakes, the Utilities Director. Do believe the Utilities Water Distribution Division installs between 500 and 600 3/4 and 1-inch meters each year. And as BA grows, that number is growing. This proposed ordinance revision will allow for a licensed plumber to now provide that service for the builder should they select to do that. And that way they can get it done perhaps at a faster rate on a better schedule. This will free up some of our staff, should improve customer service on other items. And one of the things we've been working hard on is some preventative maintenance on the fire hydrants and the valves throughout the system. So that's what this ordinance is for, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on this.
Anyone have any questions?
I think the plumbers have provided that in other communities for quite a while. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I believe so.
I'll make a motion, we approve and set for adoption.
I'll second when I can.
Motion and a second. Roll call. Motion passes. All right. 10C, consideration, discussion, and possible preview of an ordinance amending Broken Arrow Code of Ordinances, Chapter 24. Let's see. Oh, fee for service connection, repealing all ordinances. Mr. Oakes?
It's just a continuance of the same thing in a different spot, so a revision.
I'll make a motion to approve the continuance.
Second.
The motion and second. Roll call. Motion passes. Thank you, sir. Item 10D, consideration, discussion, and possible preview of an ordinance amending Chapter 7 Business Regulations and Licenses, Article 15, Medical Marijuana. Provisions, definitions, penalties. Trevor Dennis.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council again. Several changes were made at the last legislative session to the medical marijuana ordinances. What we're doing is updating our ordinances to reflect those changes. We've also made some movement from some of our provisions about the set-off requirements from the permitting section to the zoning section, which makes more sense in terms of our regulatory scheme. Those have already been made. You'll see that those are on for consideration for final adoption later on. There's also been, for example, changes to the definition of caregiver. We did update the development services to community development. We also had a provision in there related to the renewal of the permit fees to the permit. So we have a section at the very end that we hadn't had enforcement. Specifically, we had a provision that authorized the inspectors of community development department and the Broken Arrow Police Department to do enforcement, and also had a provision for penalties that if applicants refuse to do anything commanded in the ordinance, it does make it an offense that upon conviction is punishable by a fine not less than $100 or more than $750, and then also accompanying potential jail time, and then also authorizing city council to file reports with the Oklahoma State Department of Health regarding the commercial licenses of applicants. One thing to note is, I know at the state level, there's been some additional changes in terms of the name of the department and them becoming their own department. They're no longer be on the Department of Health. So we anticipate some minor changes also coming before this body once those are finally adopted. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Any questions?
Make a motion to preview the ordinance and set it for adoption.
Second. The motion is second. Roll call. Motion passes. Item 11A, consideration, discussion, and possible adoption of ordinance number 3728, amending Chapter 2, Administration, Article 1, members of boards and commissions, specifically changing the name of the Broken Arrow Convention and Visitors Bureau to Visit Broken Arrow. Lori Hill.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council, Vice Mayor. And I'm here this evening to present two ordinance update requests for you, and that's 3728 and 3729. The ordinance has Convention and Visitor Bureau listed in two places. Along with both of these ordinance is an action to approve the emergency clause. So I'll start with the first one, which is 3728, which would be updating the name of the Convention and Visitor Bureau to Visit Broken Arrow under the section of Chapter 2, Administration, Article 1, General, Section 213, where Convention and Visitor Bureau is mentioned under the members of boards and commissions. And if council approves that, it'll be updated to Visit Broken Arrow instead of Convention and Visitor Bureau.
I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 3728.
Second.
A motion and second. Roll call. Motion passes.
And then the next item is the approval of the emergency clause for that same ordinance, 3728.
So move.
A motion and second. Roll call. Motion passed.
I'll spare you from me having to read the title of the next one since it's quite long for 3729.
Mayor to read it.
Would you like to read it?
It
No.
does the
Okay.
same thing.
I'll summarize it for you. Again, this is the section for the Convention and Visitor Bureau. There are multiple places within that ordinance chapter that reference the Convention and Visitor Bureau that would be updated to Visit Broken Arrow should you choose.
Looks like we have a motion and a second already. Roll call.
That was easy.
I was trying to keep you from having to even do that.
Thank you.
We have a move for emergency clause.
Yes, and the last one would be the emergency clause for ordinance 3729.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call. Motion passes.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Item E, consideration, discussion, and possible adoption of ordinance number 3732, amending section 32C7 of the Broken Arrow zoning ordinance, repealing all ordinances.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. Jill Ferentz, Planning and Development Manager. The item before you is the zoning ordinance for 37 in two sections of the zoning ordinance. This was set for preview at the last city council meeting. The modifications before you are to Chapter 3 to modify specific use standards within the zoning ordinance for medical marijuana dispensaries, license operations for processing, and growing operations. And Chapter 10 is updating the definition section for those as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
Make a motion to adopt ordinance number 3732.
Second.
The motion and second. Roll call. Motion passes. Item F is the emergency clause.
Yes.
Move for emergency clause when it comes up.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Motion and second. Roll call. Motion passes.
Make a motion to adopt number 3733.
Second.
Okay.
What, have we talked about this?
No.
She talked about both of them at the same time.
Okay.
Jill did.
G3 is the fireworks.
Excuse me,
sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The other one.
We were just moving
I thought she
along.
referred to Chapter 10, so I thought that's.
We about got there.
Yeah. I'm ready to be done with it.
Yes, 11G, consideration, discussion, and possible adoption of ordinance number 3733, amending the Brenner codes for fire prevention and protection.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. As you may recall, at the last council meeting, there was a brief presentation that was made by Chief Barrio that talked about the committee that had met at the direction of this body to discuss possible changes, revisions to the fireworks ordinance. Subsequent to that meeting and our understanding of the direction that we had received is this body was interested in considering only one potential change to the ordinance, which specifically would be a requirement that permit holders have an appropriate extinguishing agent readily available while they discharge any fireworks. The ordinance before you has that change. If there's an interest in going forward with that change, it would just simply be a vote for it. If there is no interest for that change, table the item or not take a vote on it. The fines remain the same at $225. And then also possession of fireworks other than those allowed by that section remained at the $500. And then the fees remain the same as outlined in the manual fees. That wasn't set by the ordinance. That was just referred to in the manual fees. I know the chief is prepared to talk about any questions that they might have about additional enforcement actions, but just in terms of the potential change for the ordinance, that's what's before you today. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, or to turn it over to the chief if you'd like to ask him any.
So, I was not.
I think I
thrilled
would
with
like
adding-
to, yeah, I think I'd like to hear from the chief, just
Yeah.
because the complaint really wasn't, that I got,
Yeah.
wasn't about the ordinance. It was about the enforcement of the ordinance.
Yeah.
But I'm not, what do you?
Yeah.
Although I do appreciate the fact that we're adding an extinguisher, because my biggest concern with the ordinance is doing private fireworks at home where
Who's
you're in
gonna-
more danger.
I was
Well,
concerned with
my-
who was going to monitor that.
Yeah,
and
and
why
it
we
seems
would-
a little big government to me. I'm just saying, it really does. This does seem big government to me.
My concern was, do you get a permit and then you have to prove, how do you prove you've got an extinguisher? And
Yeah, are we gonna go around and check everybody's like permits and make sure you have your extinguisher next to your fireworks?
I understand why the chief would like that.
He's
The fire
waiting.
chief.
I'll let the fire chief speak to
Yeah,
the extinguisher.
Brandon's like, I'm out of here. I'm out
I,
of here.
I love the idea, but I think I do not like to make any type of, that we have a lot of them, and I would do a lot of our ordinances, but something we are never gonna enforce, what I do not want to put it in writing.
But I think that's what you're going to address is the enforcement of this.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I don't want to enforce it either. I think it's ridiculous to tell somebody. I mean, yes, they need to do it, but okay, I'm gonna vote no. I just started,
I said questions about enforcement, correct?
yes.
I guess.
I had Major John Walls, who's over operations, take a look at the calls for service. And what he found was on July 2nd, so like July 1st, the calls last year were 8 calls. On July 2nd, it ramped up to 18 calls. And then by July 6th, it dove back down again. So the times he outlined was 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. The 2nd through the 5th would be the enforcement times. We'll have 2 officers and 1 fire marshal out, specifically doing nothing but doing enforcement for fireworks, the ordinance itself. We have better visibility on the permits, and so we'll have a script and dispatch. And so when someone calls about fireworks, we'll do you have an address? Look it up. They have a permit. We don't need to send somebody out.
Right.
Do you have an address? B, are you willing to sign the back of a citation? Because if we get there and they're not popping fireworks, it's a will file, which means basically the citizen is issuing the citation to another citizen via their signature. If there's no address, we'll dispatch somebody, but sometimes it's just a general cul-de-sac area.
Sure.
By the time we get there, there's no one there. So, but we will, recommendations, we'll have 3 people out there, 2 officers and 1 fire marshal during these times when the peaks goes up and then stop when the peak goes back down.
I think it'll reduce a lot too by looking at the permit and having that ability, which I thought we had all along and didn't realize we didn't.
It was more cumbersome. It's a little easier now.
Sure.
There's some pre-screening, like up until because you can buy it, it's online now. So what we'll have is we'll have a pre-printed sheet in the cars too, so they can just kind of glance at it also. But a lot of the calls last year on 3rd, 4th, they didn't have permits or there was no one there when we got there.
Right.
So happy to answer any questions about the enforcement part of this. And the fire chief would be more than willing to answer any questions about extinguishing agent.
I had asked a question earlier in the week about like what our citizens voted on. When citizens voted years ago for fireworks, did we vote that there would be a license, that people would have to pay $22 to get a license?
So I did look at that, Vice Mayor. I had an email. I don't have that in front of me, but my recollection of that issue was that the question that went directly to the citizens asked if they would allow fireworks with a permit. It didn't specify that there would be, the amount or the permit fee. At the time that there was an ordinance in place that the council had passed before it went to the voters. My understanding of the politics and history of that is several folks had lobbied to have that changed And so that's why it went to the voters. But at the time it went to the voters, there was a $20 fee that was associated with the permits. So while that wasn't, asked of the voters specifically about the fee, in Oklahoma, you don't have to have voter approval for a fee. You would for a tax. So if it was a revenue generating sales tax just for general operations, you would. For fees that go generally towards offsetting the regulatory amount that it takes to process, the paperwork for the applications, for going and enforcing it, for potential cleanup by code enforcement, all of those those are services that we provide. So we're allowed to collect a fee to offset that. So as long as it's not a revenue generating tax, you can do a fee so the long way to tell you that there wasn't a vote of the people for a specific fee. It did contemplate that there would be a permit that did pass, I think by the total vote was like 14,000 to, I believe, about 8,000, if my memory serves me. So I hope that answers your question.
And I think Councilor Ford mentioned that part of the encouragement, if I remember correctly, our last conversation was part of the encouragement of voting for it was that the permitting fees would go to pay for the enforcement that would be required. So there was, at least in the politicking of it, discussion of fees because the intent was that those fees generated by the permit would help fund the enforcement provision. I don't know that it was in it, but
it goes to general fund now.
It does. That's correct. It goes to general fund, and then actually that's revenue that we would have available to pay for the police department enforcement.
Well, I think I would like to know exactly what our people voted for. Like, I'd like to know what was on the ballot so they would know what they were voting for. Because that's,
Well,
We can get that
and
together.
I looked up a newspaper article from back then, and the police chief at the time said the money from the fees and permits will help offset the cost of overtime police officers needed during the holiday weekend. Crowder said. He was
It was Chief Todd Oswald.
Okay, who was Crowder?
He was one of the research captain.
Okay, so that's who said that.
So the way this works, just logistically, is that if we sell 100 permits at $22, that's $2,200 that we take in finance would take that they'd put in the general fund revenues, and then the chief would estimate how much overtime, just like he does on other projects, how much he would need to provide enforcement, and then his budget request would include for overtime would include what that amount of money to be able to provide whatever his recommendation is on terms of enforcement. So in essence, all of that money does go towards enforcement when he has folks go out there and work. And that's what we need to make sure we do, is that we do put folks out there enforcing the provisions of the ordinance. So then we can tell residents, because we can't be omnipresent. And that's the challenge, is that we were out there doing enforcement, and the fees they paid for the time of those two individuals that are going to be working each day for 3 days?
Yep, 3 days.
And Councilor Ford, I can answer your question directly. Ordinance number 2822 specifically had proposition number 1. It went to the voters and said, quote, "Shall the city of Broken Arrow allow fireworks to be discharged by individuals with a permit within the city limits of Broken Arrow, question mark," end quote. And it says the ballots used in the election shall set out the proposition and set forth, and shall also contain, with respect to each proposition, the following words: box check for the above proposition, box check against the above proposition. I'm happy to circulate that.
We'll get it to you.
To each of them. It did pass on August 21st, 2006. I apologize. The August 21st, 2006 was when City Council passed ordinance number 2822 that called for the election with that language. Again, the ballot question did not list the amount of the permit fee, but it did ask if the fireworks should be discharged with a permit issued by the city. And again, the permit fee at the time was $20 under ordinance number 2676. And the election was held on November 7th, 2006 for the special election. The proposition passed by a vote of 14,795 in favor, 8,985 against. And that since that time, the city had continued to collect the permit fee following that special election. There were subsequent amendments, I think, to minor variations to the fireworks ordinance in 2018. 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, and then 2018. The last amendment that we had was passed unanimously by the City Council on August 21st, 2018. And in that ordinance, it required a permit fee as, quote, set forth in the manual of fees. And that on August 31st, 2021, City Council unanimously passed Resolution 1416 approving the current manual of fees, which on page 9 of the manual fees, it says, quote, residential fireworks discharge $22, end quote, under miscellaneous permit fees. So I hope that helps at least set the background of how this had come into force and effect in terms of the fees.
I'll have Trevor send something out so council will have that, so you'll be able to share that with someone that may ask a question.
So did you say that like somebody's neighbor can like write a ticket to their neighbor, like a citizen's arrest?
Basically, that's what it is.
Barney Fife?
Now, the likelihood of one neighbor signing the back citation and going to court against their neighbor.
That's the case in anything where the police don't observe the alleged crime.
Yeah, petty larceny from retailer, they
Right.
sign the back the
The person
citation.
has to
So
sign it.
So it's a crime to not have your fire extinguisher by your fireworks.
Well,
that's what we're saying. Could be if we let on.
That depends
I
on.
mean,
We
it's
haven't
not really
voted on it.
criminal,
Yeah.
or I guess it is criminal. Yes, it is. They can be. Yeah.
Well, if you violate an ordinance, same as speeding or
I
anything
just, well, this isn't the same as speeding.
Well, the complaints I've been getting from my constituents, which I'm sure you all are probably getting the same one, is again, they have a problem with the ordinance. They had a problem with it not being enforced. And I know the numbers were lower as years went on, but if you read social media, people will say, I don't buy a permit because no one checks them. So people may just have not have reported it as often. And
But
that's
I
why
don't know that would change, because I mean, all of generally policing on something like this is not proactive. It's reactive, because until the problem's reported, there's not much you can do.
And I don't even know if it's really as much about the having the permit as it doing it after the hours that are permitted. I mean, I think that's, they're still doing it 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Which that's against city
That's
ordinance anyway.
That would
It's
violate
wrong.
every ordinance.
Right.
It's actually easier after hours. I mean, during the peak time when the entire block is using fireworks, knowing who is using with a permit, and not, that's the difficult part unless we have it online, but after hours is a little bit easier because
There's
it's
no
the one
permit.
house,
There's no permit for that.
I'm just imagining the police officers rolling up and I mean, like, okay, guys, I know because I've been there, like, okay, we have to come out because your neighbor called the police on you. I don't want to be here either, but can you tell
Well,
I've
if we have
had-
dedicated
I've had cops
team
show
out
up.
there, just like we do at
Say
grant
that to
enforcement
me.
shifts, that's not the attitude to roll up with. It would be that's what it would
Well,
be,
how do you know that?
because that's their job.
Yeah.
If they're
No,
assigned to a
no.
specific thing, that's exactly what they're
Well,
gonna
no,
do.
no, but if they show up, like there's a bunch of people out there doing fireworks. So,
Well, that's the good thing about this year is we'll be able to see we'll know before we go out there. If someone says, my neighbor's using fireworks, if you give us the address, we can look on the permit, and we can say, okay, well, they got a permit,
yeah.
so it'll avoid a
Yeah,
lot of
but
those calls.
I could go across the street and do fireworks like down the street from me. And then they say that person's using fireworks when I don't live there. And it's,
That's a sneaky fireworks user. I don't know.
I think our police officers.
I don't know if I've ever encountered that particular scenario before, but
oh, they do in our neighborhood, because they go to a certain area that's not.
no, we do have
house.
we'll have I've
Yeah.
seen where I have like one person gets the
Yeah.
permit and everyone gives them all their fireworks
Yeah,
and they have one massive
yes,
show.
that's
But
it.
as long as they're within 60 feet of their front door,
Right.
that's legal.
They're compliant.
They're compliant.
They're not.
And I know that the police,
Sneaky
there would be some level of training.
I am
that,
sneaky.
you might ask some questions.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be some, but just like we have grant enforcement shifts for seatbelts or specific construction areas, if we put some people out there specifically for that, that's all they're doing. That's the only thing they're gonna be doing that night. So,
Which is great, but they'll still, if they get there and they're no longer shooting off fireworks, it still doesn't accomplish anything.
well, that's the option we'll
Yeah.
file. I mean, there is an option for enforcement, even if we don't see it occur, just like a petty larceny or any other misdemeanor crime not committed in our presence.
So before us is technically not, I mean, we can add the extinguisher.
I mean, oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean to. The, yeah, I think the only thing before us is amending it to add, the proposal is to amend it to add
The extinguishing agent.
extinguishing
Yeah.
agent.
Or,
And
or leave it.
otherwise, the ordinances remains unchanged. Isn't that
Correct, correct.
Before we vote, we do have someone who wants to speak on, in opposition. Is there any further discussion? Matt Griffiths? What? Is that an eagle? Someone made a fireworks. Oh, it was a fireworks sound. I was like, was that?
It just didn't go
I know, I
off.
heard, I said, so do you have your
Did you do that?
extinguisher? We have fireworks.
Yes, so,
Yes.
yeah, so, hi, I'm the complaining constituent previously mentioned. To be honest with you, if you want to talk big government, this is essentially an ordinance that,
Thank
the
you.
city is giving us permission to essentially celebrate a holiday. So there's that. All that aside, we are blessed, here in BA to have a city that is transparent, probably the most transparent in this state. I've been able to have many conversations with Councilor Ford, Chief Berryhill about the concerns that I had with this ordinance. The main one was being the enforcement. That was a really big concern that I had because it just wasn't happening. So I'm happy to hear that it's going to be enforced more, but I still don't agree with the ordinance. I'm still against it because of the fee. There shouldn't be a fee to obtain a permit. I, along with many, many, many other people, they are not happy campers, guys. You can go on next door and you can see how they are unhappy about this. It's ridiculous. And the people didn't vote for that. They didn't vote for a fee. They voted for a permit, but they didn't vote for a fee. So why the fee? There shouldn't be a fee. Sorry, I'm going through my notes here. I was under the impression, and so were the rest of those people on social media, that when this fee was established, it was going to go to like city manager said it was going to go to, or someone said that it was going to go to pay for those officers. And that was the impression that I had. That's the impression that many, many others had. So if that's not the case, then there should be no fee. The people didn't vote for it. They don't want it. You should take away. If I had my way, I'd trash the whole ordinance, but I would just say take away the fee. That's my 2 cents or 10 cents inflation.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Griffiths, I actually agree with you. I don't like this ordinance either, but it's the one that people passed.
It is, but they didn't vote for a fee. So there shouldn't be a
They
fee.
did they pass the ordinance? Or did we pass the ordinance?
No,
It's still
the ordinance was
Citizens
put, what
passed
the.
Because I voted against it.
Yeah, I voted against it too. The city manager or the city attorney outlined what was voted on.
I went over there.
And,
I went
and
river.
as Councilor Ford put forth, it wasn't in the ordinance. I didn't hear it in the ordinance, but the politicking and the impetus behind the ordinance was that it would be enforced with the funds from the permits. But I didn't vote for it. I'm not a big fan of the ordinance to begin with, for different reasons probably, but I'm not a big fan of the ordinance. But it's what the people voted for.
We still didn't have to have a fee.
The fee was to cover the overtime of the police officers enforcing.
But
the
Well, it was said,
It
they were
mentioned a
told
fee. It
that-
didn't
that
mention
we
the
pay for
fee
the
in
police
the.
officers.
We didn't, yeah. But that's water under the bridge.
We have it.
So, the fire extinguisher added, do we leave the ordinance as is or do we add that?
I feel like we should leave the ordinance as is, because if we're not going to enforce having an extinguisher, it kind of goes back to if we don't enforce the fireworks going off. I mean, I think we could suggest them having one because of the safety, but
Not require enforce them to,
Where's the fire chief at?
right there.
He's hiding.
Get some expert.
I mean, we all know it's
This is
good to have a
being
fire
sneaky.
extinguisher. I mean, that's like a no-brainer.
And if I could add, the recommendation for the fire extinguisher is on the permit information.
Okay.
It has been for many years.
It's been for many years.
A recommendation
the
or a,
recommendation.
okay.
Just
No,
recommending
it's
that
not
you have.
required right now.
Correct.
I think the only thing I would like to point out, obviously, is from a safety perspective, and this was my recommendation. We know that fireworks are a huge cause of not just personal injury, but also property damage. And I would clarify, it doesn't say an extinguisher. It says an extinguishing agent, your garden hose, a bucket of water. Those are appropriate extinguishing agents depending on the type of fireworks. If you're just playing with sparklers, we would like for you to drop those into a bucket of water when you're done. The debris is often a source of response for our fire trucks because it smolders and burns. if people will drop those in 5-gallon buckets, spray them down with a water hose. That is the intent of this, is to minimize fire department responses, which is one of our busiest days of the year due to rubbish fires and those types of things, as well as also put out fires that may be occurring in grass or whatever nearby. The garden hose stretched out is adequate. They want to purchase an extinguisher, that's great too. But there are multiple types of extinguishing agents that we would feel like is appropriate. It's not a specific extinguisher.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, thank you.
But, and I agree with what you're saying. If it's not going to be enforced, then adding it, but it sounds to me like that's what the chief was outlining, is how it will be enforced. So, but this is Neil, I'm going to die on it.
Okay, but that even makes it more where it's not going to be enforced, because if you roll up on a house, they can say, well, I've got my beer here that I can pour on it.
Well, that may be
That's
adequate
an
enough if it's going to extinguish
I
a
mean,
fire.
it's 4th of July, guys. Seriously. But the police are not going to be like, I'm writing you a ticket because you don't have an extinguishing agent that I think appropriate.
Well, the chief said they would enforce it.
But
So
anything can be an extinguishing agent.
Right.
What we just heard.
But if
Yes.
somebody got hurt in a lawsuit, it might not be the police would investigate that, maybe so. But in a lawsuit, you know what I mean? You were supposed to have something there to drop those in. Some kid picked it up and burned his hand.
Mhm.
I'm not speaking for or against it. I'm just saying that I think it's a good idea. You know, common sense, anytime we would pop them, always after was voted in by others, not me. But anytime, I would always make sure that there was a water hose or something there, you know, in case of a fire, put the sparklers out. You know, sometimes you gotta have some common sense with it too.
Yeah.
Used to, it was the bottle rockets. Bottle rockets would cause a tremendous amount of trouble. I don't think they can use those now, but man, you could just watch them. And I'd
Not
stay up
legally.
till 3 in the
You can.
morning and make sure.
Like in the county.
Yeah.
Some people may bring them from Missouri because it might be legal in Missouri.
Are they not legal here?
No.
I do not use them. I'm terrified of bottle rockets. They're very
She's
scary.
sharing a lot tonight, so.
Sorry. I'm tired.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny the ordinance and keep it as it's currently written.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and second. Roll call.
Did that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, I'm just, excuse me, I'm trying to find an option in the drop-down menu for that.
Really didn't.
So not at first. Because you did motion to adopt.
Notion
Or
to
to
deny.
vote
Yeah.
yes would mean we agree with
Deny
this
the
and not.
amendment.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you vote yes, you
Still
agree it's
vote
denied.
yes.
Yeah,
There we
Just
go.
put it on the way it is. We'll know yes.
Recommend for denial. There we go.
there you go.
Perfect.
So many words.
They mean things.
Goodness. Okay. Item 11H, consideration discussion on possible approval of
Oh, we
emergency
don't have to
clause.
do
We
that.
don't have to do that.
Necessary,
Never
isn't
mind. Scratch that.
No action. So we move on.
Okay. Item G is remarks and inquiries by governing body members. Any remarks?
I feel like I've talked about the Constitution a lot tonight in different ways, so I will talk. I'll give my next amendment at the next meeting.
Anyone else? I don't know if the city manager had this on his list, but there are quite a few items that are happening this week. The Rooster Days Parade is on Friday at 4 p.m. Any Broken Arrow alumni graduate, there is for all years, there's an event at 7 p.m. on Friday night at the Broken Arrow Brewing Company and Rooster Days. Saturday, we'd love for people to come out and line the streets for welcoming our Gold Star families into town for the Mission 22 War at Home Memorial. They'll leave from Stony Creek up to Lynn Lane and then go down to Mason Drive and then over to Veterans Park. So if anyone can come out and line the streets around 9:30 all the way down with flags, that would be amazing. And then the dedication is at 10 a.m. Saturday's full. It's got Rooster Days, the dedication, Pioneer Dinner, and a fish fry out at the Elks. So lots to do on Saturday, and the farmer's market.
I do have something too. I, along with, I know a few of you attended the employee picnic, and it was a great,
Yes.
it was a great picnic. Everyone, the employees that I talked to, really liked it this year. And I just wanted to thank the committee because I know they worked very hard on that. And so I wanted to make sure they knew that it was appreciated.
Love the cup.
Yes,
That was great. I did forget something. We had something that happened this week. Our city was voted one of the top 12 most patriotic cities in Oklahoma by the Purple Heart Association, or organization. So that's kind of cool. Anyone else? Remarks by city manager?
Well, you covered most of them. I appreciate that, Mayor. It is going to be a busy weekend and looking forward to it. The only thing I wanted to mention was that last week, one of the council members reached out to me about some surplus property the Turnpike Authority has up for public auction, which is it's out around the gate on 51st, which is within our city. And to just describe it generally is that if you get off the Turnpike, if you're heading east and you get off, you actually get off to go to the gate. The property's on both sides of the road there. And we took a look at it, and it is in the property. We do have sewer. We may or may not have sewer service there, and there's still a question about, depending on who the developer was, whether or not we'd be able to serve water. And I have spoken to a prominent developer who owns property surrounding that, who plans on actually trying to work out an agreement to where they could acquire that property for future development. So I feel I spoke to that person today, and they assured me they plan on submitting a proposal. And so I do know this is that should there ever be some development area that would require the city participation, sewer is not close. And if it was water, you'd have to do a looping system, which is extremely expensive as well. And so I do think that property out there, we annexed 1,200 acres in a few years ago, which is, we're going to see development out there. So I just want to let the council members know is there is private interest in there, and that if it is acquired, I do think that someday you may have someone come forward and want the city to cost participate in helping bring infrastructure to there. And that's something the council at that time will have to address if they want to do any type of cost participation through the utility authority.
Is that in a water district now, Kenny? There, he's
Falls
talking
within the water district, yes, sir.
number 4.
Yes.
So just an update. I mean, obviously there was a lot of interest in it, and it does have future development. It's an area that probably in the next 10 to 20 years, you're going to see growth. So I hope the developer that's pursuing it does acquire it, because I know they would, if they did do something, it would be a good project. However, I just don't see anything happening without the city being approached about cost participating, which we'll have to make that decision. Also, the last thing I want to mention is on the 29th of this month, I have a meeting. Several staff members are going with me with regard to the group that has had concerns about the Bells Amusement Park project. And I have the agenda, and I spoke to one of their organizers today and looked at their agenda, and their agenda, it's a really good agenda. It's a lot of questions about if a project would happen. And at this point, we have been in communications with the Seaside company out in California, and they have not advanced. And so really, I don't want to go to a meeting and be answering questions on hypotheticals. I do want to make sure that we do go and we hear the concerns should there ever be any development out there. And we're going to go to that meeting, then I'll give council an update after that meeting on the 29th. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right. There's no executive session.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
The motion and second. Roll call. Call the Broken Arrow Municipal Authority meeting to order. Roll call.
Ford.
Here.
Duty.
Here.
Parks.
Here.
Gillespie.
Here.
Wimpy.
Here. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Wait.
Second.
A motion and a second, roll call. There are no public hearings or general authority business. Any remarks from governing body members? Any remarks from city manager?
Madam Chairperson, there is an executive session to discuss if there was interest, the council could go in this executive session, but based on what I've heard, I don't believe there should be for that.
Okay, good.
So we don't need an executive session.
Yeah.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
A motion and a second to adjourn. Roll call. Call the Broken Arrow Economic Development Authority to order. Roll call.
Ford,
Here.
Moody,
Here.
Parks,
Here.
Gillespie,
Here.
Wimpy.
Here. Are there any items to be removed from consent?
We need to approve the consent agenda.
A motion and second, roll call. We have no presentations or general authority business. Any remarks from governing body members? Our city manager?
Yes, Madam Chairperson, excuse me. Every now and then, we get a developer that has an interest in actually coming to their plant or somewhere where they have development because they're considering something here in Broken Arrow. And a lot of folks in the private sector not only want someone from the staff to attend, or someone, say, for example, could be someone from the EDC and myself or my designee, but they also want an elected official come. That is not uncommon for someone that is thinking about coming to Broken Arrow, because ultimately they know that when it comes to economic development agreement, it's the authority, you, the council, and your capacity authority in this case. And so when I get those, and I do have one, and normally it's the mayor. Okay. However, 2 council members could actually go, provided everyone understands the importance, and y'all do, about confidentiality, what we discuss, and we could report back to the governing body if it's something that we could go into closed session about. But at some point, I do want a visit because I need some direction, because obviously all of you are very engaged. And if I don't know if it's a rotation or something, but if they ask for the mayor to come and the council members wants another council member to come as well, I'm perfectly fine with that. I can't have all 3 of you, respect 3 come, because then we have to advertise, and that creates transparency issues. And so I really just need for y'all to think about it. And if we did something to where, however we do it, but if someone asks me going forward, I just want to know, I can lock it in and we can roll. So just give that some thought, and I'd like to visit with you about it sometime at the next meeting or next month, to what my recommendation would be. And that way everyone would get their turn, because we do have one, and I'm sure it's not going to be the only one. You remember several years ago with Alpha Laval, they were very, very much wanted elected official to be a part of those meetings, because they know eventually I have to bring anything I talk about back to governing body. So just something to think about.
All right, we have no executive session. Move to adjourn. I have a motion and a second, roll call. Motion passes, we are adjourned.
Good job.
There's a lot on there. There's a lot of stuff.